you for having me.
In the back.
Yeah, we can put you right here.
Can it be put on, can it be pasted on the stage? It says 50 cents. Yeah, and then move this, but we have a press, move on the stand for press. And then we need to be together.
Is it for Trey?
And I can't read those names, so I just have some.
Christopher, you're over here. And Christine?
No disrespect.
Christine. Christine?
This is yours. Yes.
I'll call her down and see wherever my purse is. Text her and tell her that I'll be busy.
No, I'm in a second.
Felix Rubio. Yes.
Give me a second.
Like it's just.
Did you tell her that?
I can speak. Mm-hmm.
Yes, we're gonna help you out.
Yeah. I'll find it. Oh, there it is.
I forgot her name. Sheila.
I call to order the Congressional Children's Caucus of the United States House of Representatives for the historic listening session in Uvalde, Texas, to be able to hear from those who experienced the massacre at Robb Elementary School May 24th, 2022. My name is Sheila Jackson Lee. I'm the founder and chair of the Congressional Children's Caucus. I serve on the House Judiciary Committee, and in that capacity I do chair the Subcommittee on Crime, Terrorism, and Homeland Security, a member of the Homeland Security Committee, and a member of the Budget Committee. I'm delighted to have with me your neighbor, Congressman Joaquin Castro, a senior member of the Intelligence Committee, a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee with a subcommittee chairmanship, and a member of the Ed and Labor Committee. Our purpose here is singular. Nothing else, nothing more. It is, number one, we are here because we care. We are here also because the federal government has an ultimate responsibility to the people of this nation, people of the state, in particular the people of Uvalde, the children of Robb Elementary School, the parents and families. We have an ultimate responsibility. And even though I was welcomed here on Sunday after the massacre by the graciousness of a very hurt and pained senator, Senator Roland Gutierrez, who attended the church service, as Congressman Castro will indicate his presence. And that did not, for me, give the final answers of the families, which I have seen and heard for a period of time. So if I could say it again, we're here because we care, because the federal government, the United States of America, should never forget. So I want to thank the families, family members, for the beloved children and teachers who we lost at Robb Elementary School. I want to thank the doctors, nurses, first responders, and psychologists who were on the front lines during the aftermath of the horror. Thank the neighbors, community members, supporters, media, political leaders, as I indicated, State Senator Roland Gutierrez, and others who have been investigating or have shown themselves to these families as caring about getting the truth. Those who have searched for answers, call for accountability, and comfort the families of the fallen. I thank them. And I thank those who have not stopped. To the survivors of the tragedy, for managing their personal struggles for recovery and renewal. That includes our teacher and our children. And I want to add, to the survivors, there should be not one step back of resources that you need for the holistic of your care. No one should diminish your survival, and your survival should be at the top of our concern for your healing. The entire nation continues to grieve with Uvalde, the community, especially those who lost loved ones. And on behalf of the Congressional Children's Caucus, which I founded and lead, I can attest that we share your pain, though it is never the pain that you have. Yet I realize that the depth of anguish that is endured each day by the bereaved families is unimaginable and inconsolable. We will always remember, with heavy hearts yet loving memories, the 21 dear souls were lost at Robb Elementary School on May 24, 2022. Forgive me as I call these names to ensure that they are not forgotten. Makina Lee Mathis, Nevaeh Bravo, Jose Manuel Flores Jr., Javier Lopez, Tess Marie Mata, Rogelio Torres, Alejandra Eli Abner Garcia, Alejandra A. Torres, Annabelle Guadalupe Rodriguez, Jackie Cazares, Uzziah Garcia, J.C. Carmelo Lavanas, Mate Juliana Rodriguez, Ella Nicole Silvero, Amory Joe Garza, Alexandria Lexi Anaya Rubio, Aletha Ramirez, Irma Garcia, and Eva Morales. A sound that I would like never to hear again, but that I will always remember. Please be reassured that I will always stand with you, we will always stand with you, and we will always fight alongside for accountability and answers to what happened. That is why we're here. I need to hear your voice as to what should be the next steps of federal relief. We will always fight for reforms to prevent future tragedies like this, and we're not alone in our dedication to your quest for answers and justice. We have been inspired by the determination of those of you in the Uvalde community. You've been everywhere. You've traveled with pain to Washington, D.C. and to other places. You have pressed your local leaders into action. The forceful and eloquent appeals that many of you have made to local officials and the media has impacted us, and the Congress and the federal government should act. The world, millions nationwide, have seen you, and they know your pain and your story. How deep it is, they cannot imagine. Soon after the tragedy, we came to Uvalde, as I said, and spent time with grieving families, hugging children who, 9 years old, were talking about their friend that played soccer or baseball or track or that they had as a friend. Speaking to some of you, half-broken parents and loved ones, and of course, statewide leaders who are here. In Congress for decades, I personally introduced gun safety bills, banning assault weapons, raising the age, storage bills. We too have faced a mountain of hurdles. But we're not giving up. Some steps have been made, but it'll be your voice to tell us that since 1999 with Columbine, we have to do more. It's been a long time and a lot of gun deaths since then. And the primary obstacle has been those on the other side who refuse to know each other's pain. We sat down on the floor of the House in 2016 after tragedies that killed so many. John Lewis, late civil rights leader, said, how many more mothers, how many more fathers need to shed tears of grief before we do something? It is you that will be the guide. There are too many children, babies, teachers, our mothers, our fathers, our sisters, our brothers, people going out to dance, have fun, dying because of gun violence. And there's certainly too many children. So I'll quickly say to you that in the course of what we will listen to, you'll hear us mention what legislation is possible, but again, we're to be guided by you. Protecting Our Kids Act had it all, the age, the ban, the ultimate ban later, storage bill, but again, there's more work to do. What we have now, we hope will be used by this community, which includes the Safer Communities Act, which is security for our schools. But again, we'll hear that throughout the hearing, but as I indicated, we came to hear you. Started out by saying why we're here. We're here because we care. We care because your voices are deserving of respect and action. Thank you for your presence here today. And I'll now yield to the gentleman from San Antonio, Texas, for his opening statement. Congressman Castro.
Thank you, Congresswoman Jackson Lee. My name is Joaquin Castro, and I represent my hometown of San Antonio. I have the main San Antonio district. And I joined Congresswoman Jackson Lee in wanting to help this community get to the bottom of what happened, to achieve transparency, but also accountability. Earlier today, in speaking with some of the family members who lost their children, I offered my condolences as you continue to grieve. I know that many folks have offered their condolences by now, and I also believe that there's a lot more than "I'm so sorry" that needs to be said and answered at this point. I am haunted by the question of how almost 400 law enforcement officers could stand outside of a classroom or school, hearing children cry for help, and not respond for over an hour. I think the whole nation seeks an answer to that question. Your words are more important than mine or Sheila's today, and so I'll make it quick. But I do want to say that I believe this community was not only failed on that day at Robb Elementary, but also by every level of government so far, including the governor of the state of Texas, the Department of Public Safety, and local elected officials who have refused to release basic information about what happened and why it happened. And that is a second kind of assault on the community of Uvalde. And I believe it's wrong. We want to hear today how you believe Congress can be helpful. And we are both urging Congress to be more involved in making sure that this situation, this process is more transparent, that there is accountability and that there is justice. My fear is that if there isn't, that there will be another Uvalde, and there will be other communities who will not only go through the tragedy of losing loved ones or surviving this kind of shooting, but that others in power will feel empowered to ignore the cries of communities around the country when they ask for answers later on, when they demand answers. And so this effort today is not only to get answers for you, but to make sure that this doesn't happen again, the kind of gun violence, mass gun violence that we saw, but also the abject failure of people in positions of power in government, unwilling to be basically transparent and accountable to the people they represent. That's what's at stake. And so there have been a few positive things done in the Congress so far. In June, for example, the Biden administration announced a $1.5 million grant to expand mental health services in Uvalde and help children feel safer at school. And 2 months later, Congress passed the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which strengthens aspects of our nation's gun safety laws and makes important investments in community-based mental health services. But you all know that there is still a lot of work to be done. And I share your frustration, as I mentioned, that Governor Abbott has refused to call a special session to pass meaningful gun safety reforms. And I hope continued pressure from Uvalde families and the state of Texas will bring forth change in our gun laws and accountability for the failures that occurred on May 24th at Robb Elementary. But today we're here to talk about the support you need to honor the victims of the Robb Elementary shooting and build a future for Uvalde that's not defined by this tragedy. And we stand with Uvalde, and most of all, we're here to listen to you. With that, I yield back, Chairwoman.
Thank the gentleman. Would the families indulge just for a moment, thank you, Congressman, to allow Commissioner Garza, is he present? And President, Dr. Hernandez? The President, please, yes, please come. Please come. You are first. Thank you so very much, and thank you so much for the courtesy. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Sheila Jackson Lee and Congressman Joaquin Castro. And on behalf of Southwest Texas Junior College, the community of Uvalde, we appreciate your attention and really the care for what's needed in this community, but especially what's needed by these families that were so grossly injured by the events, not only of May 24th, but the subsequent reaction and response to that horrible tragedy. It's an honor to host this event, and like I said, I'm very pleased that you have shown the interest and the care to listen from the families directly. So on behalf of Uvalde, on behalf of Southwest Texas Junior College, thank you.
Thank you so very much. Commissioner, thank you so very much for your courtesy. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
At the end of the day, these two distinguished individuals are always fighting to see that justice prevails. At the end of the day, they're fighting for us. And they're here today in Uvalde for specifically that reason, to help us. As a county commissioner, commissioner's court, everything we do, we're always keeping the parents and the families in mind. I will never forget that day. And my heart goes out again to the families. And I want to thank you, Congressman Sheila Jackson-Lee, Congressman Joaquin Castro. I know you're fighting for us, and I appreciate all the help that you're doing for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, thank you so very much. Let me acknowledge again to the families that your words will be recorded. As you speak today, you affirm that what you say is the truth. And as you speak today, this congressional session wants you to speak your heart. We will start first with Mr. Arnulfo Reyes, wounded at Robb Elementary School, a teacher that has shown himself to be committed to his students. He was badly wounded. He's a fourth grade teacher. He's undergone 10 surgeries. He tried his best to protect his students. And as he indicated, he had pretty much given up on life, but God kept him. We thank you and welcome you as you tell us in your own words. You're recognized now for 5 minutes. Mr. Reyes.
I'm at a loss for words because
We'll wait on you. That's all right. Take your time. You want to take some water? Why don't you take some water?
I think what makes me upset is that, like Mr. Castro said, that it was more than 370 something cops or agencies out there. When I could hear the students asking for help and nobody never went in. It upsets me that they never went in and never tried. And some of those are still working, and I don't know what else is it gonna take for these families to get the answers that they need.
Mr. Rainsby, thank you. I'll pause for a moment. If you wish to say something else, we may have a question for you at the end. But if you wanted to say one other thing, you may at this time.
I'm fine.
Thank you so very much. Next witness is Mr. Cazares. Javier, parent of victim Jacqueline Cazares. And I know he will tell the story of his beautiful 9-year-old. But the one thing I want to say, she was a free spirit who was willing and wanting to help others. Mr. Cazares, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you both again for being here. My name is Javier Cáceres. Yes, I'm sorry. My name is Javier Cáceres, father of Jacqueline Cáceres. Bear with me if I get emotional. I'm going to go back to that day. I get the call that nobody wants to get. Rushed down there as fast as I could. Left my car running, door open, going to the school perimeter. I'm about 40 yards from the school. I can hear the shots going on. I can hear, them breaking windows, getting kids out, and just hoping one of those daughters, hoping to see my daughter run out of that window. That never happened. We weren't physically touched, but we were fighting with police, to do their jobs. And after we heard those shots, like, you need to rush in there, and they say we're here to keep you out. I'm like, your job is to go in there. After hearing those shots, fast forward, heard more shots. We see people getting handcuffed, and just complete chaos out there. Finally get the call from my niece. I'm gonna skip this. My niece went to the hospital and saw my daughter being pulled out of the ambulance. My daughter passed at 117 to a gunshot wound to the chest. From there, I promised my daughter, while she lay there, that I was going to fight. And we've been doing so from Austin to Washington, and we're demanding change. The day after, we had a press conference with Greg Abbott. Again, going back to gun laws, and he's like, there's no reason for any type of change in the past 60 years for change. I'm like, well, why not? It gets worse every decade, and there's no reason for change. Me, that's BS. You know, changes just happened after Columbine. Again, you know, we've asked for special meetings. You know, we're not getting them. It's falling on deaf ears. You know, he says it's unconstitutional. Where in that Second Amendment does say you have to be 18-year-old to carry that type of weapon that's easy to modify by a bump stock or, in this case, a Generation 2 Hellfire trigger system that this person used to modify that weapon. We're here to fight and we're going to keep on fighting. Again, I mean, I know we want to ban assault weapons. It's going to be a hard fight. It's a fight we're willing to, we're knowing. Here at the state level, you know, we're asking at least for 21 years and older to buy that weapon. It's simple. I know it was done in Florida. Why not Texas? And I can go on, but that's all I have to say at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Mr. Britt Cross, and of course his son, Isaiah Garcia. Energetic, big-hearted, full of love. You recognized for 5 minutes. Thank you.
I'm Brett Cross. My son Isaiah was massacred on May 24th. Javier just said, I mean, we all ran there, rushed there. Our babies were inside, screaming, while officers kept parents from saving them. So what we're looking for is accountability, among other things. Nobody is being held accountable for nothing. And I know that's a state level issue, but our lives were ripped from us. Not only did we lose our kids, but we had to go home and tell our other kids that their brothers or sister wasn't coming back. And that is something I don't want anybody else to feel. How many more damn kids need to die before the government does something? A lot of us are missing work, counseling, therapy. I mean, there's times where if a book falls on the floor, my house shuts down. I was never one that really believed in PTSD or anything like that, if you didn't serve or anything. But it's real. My children get so sick to their stomach with stress, scared to go to school, because school is now associated with death. But we're trying to get by, we're trying to survive, we're trying to hold on. But hell, I mean, like I said, most of us can't even go back to work. And it's hard. We've got to do something. We've got to. And we need help, because it's obvious that Greg Abbott doesn't give a damn. That's all I've got.
Thank you very much. Let me acknowledge Christine Olivares, who I know is here, and we thank her so much for her presence here today. Kendall Olivares. But I'm grateful also for Angel Garza, who is here today. He'll speak about his beautiful angel and what he experienced on that day. You're recognized now for 5 minutes. Thank you so very much.
My name is Angel. One of the parents of Amory Joe Garza. First off, I just want to say thank you guys for doing this. I speak for all the parents when I say this means a lot to us. A lot of people try to do things and think that they're doing things in our favor and completely just don't even care about what we have to say about it at all. So the fact that y'all are including us does mean a lot. That day I was at work and my fiance texted me saying that she heard gunshots. Our backyard is 100 yards from the school. I was in the room with the patient, so my mother had to call my supervisor, and they got me out of the room. And I was one of the first there. There was only a few cops there at the time, and you know, it's hard to think about that day because you think about what you would have done if you knew this. Instead, we had people lying to us, saying, oh, nobody's shooting, everybody's okay, just trust us, we have kids. It didn't really get surreal until the kids started running out of the class. And one of the students was covered in blood. So as a med aide, I went over to help her, just see if she was okay. And she explained that she was fine. And she explained that they shot her best friend. And she saw her best friend wasn't breathing anymore. I walked away from her, and as she got on the bus, the parent in me just had to go back and ask her, you know, who was your best friend? And when she sat there covered in blood and said Amory's name, that's something that we can't describe to you. That's something that we wouldn't want you to feel. You know, the mind is a powerful thing. And when you sit there and get into a mind battle with yourself, it can make you go into places that you don't want to go. Like Brett said, a lot of us haven't been to work. And what people don't understand is that, like, who wants to go on? How are we supposed to convince ourselves that we need to better ourselves when our kids aren't here? No, this shouldn't be a thing. Nobody wants to be up here talking. Accountability needs to happen, and we as people just need to make sure that this doesn't happen again. It's cliched, it's overplayed, everybody says it, but that's sincerely what we want. Nobody should go through this. This isn't okay. You don't know what it's like to wake up and contemplate your life. You don't know what it's like to feel like a failure, even though everybody's in your ear telling you there's nothing you could have done. It doesn't matter. That's our kid. We just want people to listen to what we're telling them. And we want something to change. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Kimberly Rubio, parent of Alexandra Lexi Rubio, and just, I know you know, driven, athletic, as she's been said, intelligent and fun. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
My name is Kimberly Rubio. I'm Lexi's mom. I want to thank y'all for the opportunity to share her story and my experience. I apologize in advance because it's just not a good day and I'm not prepared. But I think the fact that I have to sit here and tell y'all how the state and our federal government, how to do their job, is evidence enough of the massive failure that we've experienced. I don't have a blueprint for how to live when your 10-year-old daughter is murdered in her classroom. But I think the state and our nation should have a roadmap by now. This is not the first mass shooting. It will not be the last until we federally ban these weapons. So you better get really good, really fast at how to deal with the aftermath. We need transparency and accountability. We need resources that are readily and easily available. I'm just a mom from a really small town. I have no idea what we need other than I need my daughter back. If I can't have my daughter back, then I just want change. I don't just want it, I am demanding it. I'm so sorry I can't share her story today because it's just too much today.
Thank you so very much. We'll wait a moment if you wanted to add anything else. Been powerful, and we thank you very much for the sacrifice you are making today, all of you that are making today. Mr. Salinas, who has other children that he's raising, and recognize the pain that is, because Christopher Salinas, the dad, lost Samuel, 10, he was a real star on Good Morning America and was ready for life. Will you tell us your story, please? Mr. Salinas, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you all for being here. My name is Christopher Salinas. I'm a widow father of 4 children. My son, Samuel Salinas, is a survivor from room 112. And I just want to start by telling his story. He is an amazing child. He grew up loving and caring. He grew up full of life and full of hope. Until that very day he was stolen, everything that he was. He's no longer the same child he grew up to be. He no longer sees life the same way. He's battling physically and mentally. Every day is a struggle for him to just be normal and love the things he once loved. He's dealing with survival. Being a survival. He's dealing with just life in general being different to him because he no longer sees the goodness in life no more. He knows that there is evil and darkness, and people are not what the whole world explained to them growing up. My son has gone to many visits of doctors. He's been to many specialists, and we all get the same story that he's lucky to be alive, he's brave, he's gonna be okay. And I believe that, and so did he, until school started this year, and he went back to school, and he figured out that he's no longer the same, and that he will never be the same. He's no longer able to do some of the sports he was able to do because he starts hurting from his leg and he has to stop. He can't even climb stairs in his school. A lot of the things that he enjoyed in the past is ripped from him, and he cries and he's very depressed from it. He still has nightmares of the day that shooter entered his classroom and stared at him, pointed the gun to him. Therapy doesn't seem to help much. It just, I guess, helps him to speak, but not really mentally and physically helping him much. It's a very struggle that I face, not only with him financially, because I know he needs a lot of help, but my other children see that I'm kind of putting more attention to him because I see he needs more help. And I also see that I'm hurting my household due to that. But that's just a challenge I'm willing to, pick up the slack as a father, single father. To raise my kids different, I know it's going to be a very struggle, knowing that my son went through so much, and it's just something that will never come erased from his mind, and he's always going to grow up with that. But what I do now till then is what matters the most. And I've asked for help, and I begged for help, and what I need is help. I never, as many people here, had never witnessed the tragedy we've gone through. I understand that. But we all need to learn from each other and be there for each other to figure out a solution to help the problems that we face. And I'm just grateful for the many of y'all that are here to hear our story, to find and figure out a true way to help us. On that note, I thank y'all.
We're going to take a moment to ask just a few questions. As I do that, I'm going to ask the second panel to indulge me for a moment and just add an additional chair just to make sure that Father Michael Marsh is able to speak for 5 minutes before we proceed. Michael Marsh, Reverend Dr. Michael Marsh, St. Philip's Episcopal Church. Father, if you would come and take a seat and speak. After you speak, we'll ask questions and we'll go into the second panel. I know that, forgive me, he has to depart, and I just want to make sure, I think it's appropriate that he has a moment here.
Thank you. I appreciate you making...
And speak right into the mic. We're all having...
Thank you. I appreciate you making time and opportunity for me to speak. I was called to the hospital shortly after victims started arriving. Spent that afternoon amongst tears and screams and questions I couldn't answer. I stayed there all day, and then at the Civic Center that night. That day, the parents and family and loved ones and friends of those who were killed or injured, this entire community, in exile, we lost our home. We lost whatever image we had of ourselves in this community and even our nation. And since that time, St. Philip's and other churches and organizations have tried to do the right things. We've tried to provide financial assistance, help with counseling. But that's just a drop in the bucket. I'm afraid we're going to do all the right things. We'll provide money, we'll provide counseling, we'll build a new school, maybe a rec center, and nothing will change. And if nothing changes, we have lost our humanity once again. And we can't afford that. It's too hard to get back. We need help with that. I don't want to do the right things and nothing change. I want something to change about gun legislation, about poverty and racism and bullying, about support for families and parents trying to help their kids. I want us to ask the deeper questions. to not just hold people accountable, do the right thing, and consider that we've closed the case, because it's not. This is about healing our hearts, about remembering our children so that we can remember, put back together the future in a new way. Because if we don't remember the future and put it together in a new way, we will always be imprisoned by the past. We've got to start the deeper conversations, the hard ones that nobody wants to have. Because that's where our healing will begin. And that's where our hope for the future lies. Thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me take just a few minutes to raise some questions. I'll just yield to you, and then we'll move immediately to panel 2, and we hope the parents, all that are here, will recognize, as my colleague started out, I said we care, and we care with condolences, but we also are reminded of the old adage that it is deeds, not just words. And I hope that you see in this Congressional Children's Caucus that is almost 2 decades old in the United States Congress, that started out with Columbine and have every year focused on guns, but focused on other issues that impact our children. What we organize for is to let the Congress know that non-voters, children, have to be our most important priority. We were not to let children be silenced just because they don't write a tax check or they can't cast a vote. And for some reason, it seems that what has happened in Uvalde, Parkland, though there was some change there, or Sandy Hook, it seems that it's okay, it's children. And we know we lost 2 blessed teachers. So, Sister Reyes, if you would, let me ask the first question. I think in some of your interviews you said a number, 77 minutes. Can you tell me about those 77 minutes?
Those 77 minutes was the longest time in my life. In those 77 minutes, we heard all the gunshots. My students asking me, "What's going on, Mr. Reyes?" I had no idea what was going on because I would have never thought that Uvalde would have this. Never in my life. So when it came to me and I thought about it and saw the bullets breaking sheetrock off the wall, that's when I realized it's a shooter. All my students that were there asking me, "What's going on?" And I said, "I don't know what's going on. But get under the table like we have practiced before. And close your eyes." So they listened to what I told them. As I stood in my position where we had always practiced, he was there already. I could see the shadow, saw the sparks come out of the gun, hit me, I fell to the ground. He came around and he shot my students. He then sat at my desk, dropping metal objects. He then sat there and taunted me. He spilled water on my back. He placed my phone on my back. And he splattered my blood on my face. As I laid there for a while, he shot me in my back. I guess he wanted to make sure I was dead. And he would go back and forth to the classrooms. And I heard the little girl say, "Officers, come in here. We're here." And he went. And he shot her. Because after that, I didn't hear it.
Mr. Reyes, did you indicate that someone came in the room, or it was the shooter that was in the room? Did anyone else come in the room to help?
Nobody had come into the room until after.
After?
After the 77 minutes. I had just heard them come, and they would talk to him to come out. I'm trying to negotiate with him to come out, and then we wouldn't hear nothing for a while. And then they would come talk again. But during the quiet times that they were not talking to him, I felt that we were just abandoned. We were just abandoned there and left to die, you know. It's just. And then when they finally went in, I could hear the desk. I could hear the desk and chairs moving. And that's when I told myself that, you know, if I didn't make it, it was because, you know, a stray bullet or something, but I just heard all the gunshots.
Let me ask this final question to you, and then I'll ask one more, and then I'll yield to you out of respect for the time that we have. What does this do for teaching and teachers? What do you think teachers think across America, or teachers here in Uvalde, or teachers here in the state of Texas? What do they think? What do you think this has done to your profession? And let me explain, not to say that they're not passionate teachers. That's why you do this job. This is not to speak about teachers or teaching. But what, you being a teacher, what do you think this impact has on teachers?
As everybody knows, we already do have a shortage of teachers. And I've spoken to some of my friends, and I think that all the promises that they were made, that the school would feel safe and secure, and they're not seeing it. They're not seeing it at all. And I can tell you that, I mean, other than getting a paycheck from them, but my district has not even They don't even call to check up on me. They don't do much for us, and so I think that it's going to affect teachers for a long time. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for.
To the families here, more than painful. So I'm just going to say this question, and you answer it as whoever wants to answer it. And I think, Angel, you spoke of it. Families were rushing to the building. What kind of response were you getting when you were rushing to the building? Number two, how can the federal government help with the necessary resources that get directly to you, to families? What kind of system should we put in place? We're reading and understanding that there's a complication of private funds. We don't know if government funds, they're victim funds for the state of Texas, and they're victim funds for the federal government. So people may want to answer, parents may want to answer separate questions. You don't have to answer it all. One is the reaction when you were rushing to the building. Maybe one person can answer that. And then the resources that should come to victims. And God knows that you're victims.
I think I think they were more focused on keeping us out versus getting him out. I mean, I myself was put into handcuffs because I was trying to get in, and I was arrested. I mean, they didn't put me in the back of the squad car, but I was put in the handcuffs and detained because I was trying to get in.
Thank you.
Same here, man. We were a lot of fathers that were that were there, were being held back. And again, we asked questions. What are you doing to help? We're here to keep you back. But again, we then were rushed when those shots were being fired.
You heard them?
Yes, ma'am. Everybody that was there pretty much heard them. I can count. The first time was like 4 shots, and then down the line another 3. And it was complete chaos. And as far as government funding, and school safety. I mean, I wish there was talking about the money itself is giving it to them is not wise because they don't use it correctly. It should be somebody else to manage that money.
And giving it to whom?
That's going to be with that money and not the school itself.
Or the compassion fund, anything like that.
Exactly.
Establish a compassion fund?
No, I don't agree with the way they're running the compassion fund. I think most parents don't.
Okay.
It's just the resources that they're helping. I think that they should make sure that they're helping, the survivors, the families of deceased, before, they sit there and just use up all their resources on people who don't really need it. I think one of the things that hurts the families most is we feel like a lot of people are trying to take advantage of our children's passing, and that's just adding fuel to the fire for us.
Let me commit to exploring that.
Can I comment on the application process?
Yes.
It's like 20 pages and extremely difficult. We got it days after. We don't even want to get out of bed. Now, 4 months later, I can't even read a full chapter of something like a book. I can't do that. And then if you get past that and you turn it in, they send it back with just an insane amount of documents that they need. You know who I am. You know I lost my daughter. It needs to be easier.
I agree on that. I just went this Friday. They said they were supposed to make it easier for us, and they were going to have someone coach us and be there to do the whole thing, and we were abandoned at the last minute, and we were all struggling to do it as well. And the new laws and regulations they're implying is making it harder for us. This fund, they said it was supposed to help us, and it's not even going to be able to be used to help us. A lot of us made personal funds to help our children with our needs, and that money has been going to that. But the ROB fund has been used, I guess, as a defense mechanism against us because we stand up and fight. And they're using that as a thing to harm us and hurt us. And we all notice that and reflect that when we raise our voice, we're come against by other people that know what they're doing, and we're stopped and made it harder for us.
Many of you said that you're not able to go back to work. Are they aware of that those resources are important for you?
So even the state resources that in a whole lot, the application process is we go into a room and there's 30 tables and they expect us to walk around to each one of them as well and fill out the same thing over and over. Like Kim said, that to be able to sit still for that long and just do the same thing over and over and over and over is ridiculous, you know? I have to use my FMLA from my work, and I've only got a little bit longer on that. So, you know, that any application process for anything is just it's too hard.
Again, on that, I'm sorry. Again, on that note, you know, I did the same thing. You know, I'm self-employed. I filled out 3 different or 4 different types of things and denied all of them. I was denied all of them because I wasn't putting money into the, you know, most of the word unemployment
Right.
and stuff like that. So I'm like, right, you know, they're supposedly helping us and they're not.
And I was denied because I'm a teacher and I make too much.
Here in 4 months in without work.
Well, let me yield to Congressman. We are here collectively in shock, and that's why we are the federal government, and there needs to be a reach down to try and get through this. As we think, as I understand, you're speaking about the state-administered fund, which I mentioned Victims Fund, but your fund separately. It does not appear to be dealing in reality.
Oh, no, at one point, we went to fill something out for an electric bill, and they said, oh, bring us proof that you're 3 months behind on your electric. I don't know any electric company out there that'll let you do that, but I can't get behind 3 months. My children can't go without electricity. So it's stuff like that.
It's those kinds of things that need to be fixed.
Yes, ma'am.
Let me thank you. I could spend a very long time with you, but this has given me just another insight into the pain that I saw when I first came in May, just days after the loss, the injury of your loved ones. So I want to yield to my colleague, Congressman Castro, and we thank you, and we will thank you at the end in a moment, and we'll move to our next panel. Congressman Castro.
Thank you, all of you, for your courage and your bravery and your ability even to sit here and speak about what happened. What happened at Robb Elementary has scarred the nation, and I'm sure that you all know that. In my alma mater, Jefferson High School, last week in San Antonio, when there was a report of gunshots, which fortunately turned out to be false, hundreds of parents showed up at the school, almost in physical altercations with the San Antonio Police Department, who were on scene to try to get into the school at Jefferson. And unfortunately, I believe that's probably going to happen more often across the country because of what happened at Robb Elementary and the law enforcement failure in this community.
It just happened in Russia.
I want to ask you, and Congresswoman Jackson Lee asked some of it, but for the folks who did show up there outside the school, what were you told by law enforcement that they were doing in that moment to protect your kids, protect the school?
There was no response. They didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, a lot of us were told that it was a barricaded shooter situation. That whenever they arrived on scene, nobody was shooting, nothing like that was going on. So
They told you nobody was shooting? That there
Yeah.
was,
So to our knowledge, they had him in a room, and it was like a hostage situation.
Do you recall which officers, whether it was DPS or the local police or the school police? Or?
So I had one retired Uvalde PD tell me, and then I had two DPS officers tell me towards the entrance of the school, tell me that they got it under control. It's a barricaded shooter situation, and that nobody's hurt right now. That's all we kept hearing is a bunch of trust me, we have kids, we got this.
And how long into this, we talked about 77 minutes, how long into the situation were you still being told that there was nothing that was going on or nothing that you need to worry about?
I think once the kids came out and we saw that they were bloodied and stuff like that, that's when the situation became surreal to us, that there's more to this that they're not telling us. And once I was able to talk to Chloe, then, she's the 10-year-old. She knows she's old enough to tell me what she saw.
And all of you have met with the state leadership, Governor Abbott and Steve McCraw of DPS at this point, is that right? What did the governor tell you about?
Not DPS.
Just Governor Abbott. What did Governor Abbott tell you about the law enforcement response?
Nothing really. And the only thing that he told me was when I asked him to call for a special session to raise the age, he said that wouldn't have made a difference. I'm going to let that sink in for a minute because he said it would not make a difference.
And
When
it
that
was-
Did he say
POS
what would make a difference or
raising
offerings?
the age to 21. It wouldn't have made a difference.
But did he say what he thought would make a difference?
Mental
or what
health.
the solutions were?
All he would talk about was mental health, which, yes, everybody agrees that there's a mental health problem. But, somebody that has mental health issue goes into a school with a bag of rocks, they ain't going to do the same damage.
And I want to ask you in a second about the resources, besides the financial resources, which I'll ask about now, but the mental health resources, the other resources that y'all may need. As far as you're aware, how many different separate financial funds are set up that families are supposed to be able to draw from?
Apparently,
'Cause
they
I know-
all combined it into the compassion fund. There was like five
Everything came-
big ones, 5 or 6 big distributors, and they all came together as one.
And who's administering that?
So they put a committee together, committee of 5 people, something like that, 5 or 6 people, and they've had about 2 to 3 meetings, basically inviting the entire population of Uvalde to ask what they think that they should do with the money, which is
There's
Yes, sir.
also, I'm not sure 100% on this story, but there is supposedly almost $3 million dollars out there for, supposedly for a rec center and for the community, but, I haven't even heard about it till the other day. And, I don't want, I can't put her name out there, but I don't want to,
Sure.
say it out loud. I could care less, but I want to be correct before I even say that.
Sure.
But there's money out there. This is a lot of money out there, but we're not hearing about it.
And we ask the question because we want to make sure that you get the relief that you need, but also, as y'all know, there was an outpouring of support from the country. Millions of dollars contributed to help you all. And we want to be sure that there isn't any kind of malfeasance or people keeping money that aren't supposed to be keeping money, different people that offer professional services, taking fees and other things off the top of stuff that they're not supposed to be and draining those funds for you. And so that's something that we'll follow up on as well. And then my final question for you all is, I know we've talked about, you've been clear about gun reform, and we share that concern with you. And Congress has, the House of Representatives at least, has voted on a bill on that. And the Senate has unfortunately not taken it up in the Congress. And the governor has not called a special session to do anything in the state of Texas. But in addition to that, what other resources, what other things do you need? What else could Congress be helpful with, or even the state legislature and the governor?
You can't help us. We just want the federal ban on assault weapons.
Another thing that I can think of is more police training. You know, some of these officers, you know, aren't obligated to take these alert, you know, trainings or other type of training. It's if they want to or not. It should be
Mandatory.
mandatory.
Okay.
I would like to add on that. I mean, I would like to see more facilities and things for kids. That way they give more hope. A lot of these kids come from broken homes, dark places, you know, that we don't even comprehend what they're coming from. And maybe a place they can just come and be kids, you know, a safe place for them to come from a broken home or somewhere that they feel like a safe place for them. I mean, I think that would be very good. The parks that we have here are trash. They're, you know, it's a joke. I mean, these kids, I mean, they come from this, and I mean, what did they expect to, you know, become? When I think if we invest in our children, I think the outcome would be better in the future for us. I don't think we should give up on our kids. I mean, I think that's what we should put our main focus on.
I have one more thing with school safety. You know, like Mr. Reyes said, there's a lot of promises that were made, and none of them have been done. You know, all we have is fences, and you know, I was able to go out there with my daughter in high school. Same locks, same doors. They're pieced together. You know, with welds and no new doors that were promised. Bulletproof doors, bulletproof glass. None of that's been done. You know, they started doing this almost 3 months later, and you know, they need to hold up that promise. And I'm going, where's all that money going to?
Yeah, and instead of that, they talk about how they're going to be debt-free next year.
Exactly.
Is this the school district?
Yeah, debt-free off of our children who were massacred. Like we said, people profit off of us, and it's sickening.
They were wowing it while we're almost out of debt. Wow. When they were always in debt.
We just need something to change, because if it doesn't, then we feel like our kids died for nothing, and we're not going to let that happen.
You know, the definition of insanity is doing something over and over and expecting different results. This is insanity. After every shooting, we do the same thing and the same thing and the same thing, and nothing helps. We've got to do something. You know, we're appreciative of that bipartisan legislation that was passed, but that is just a stepping stone. We can't just stop there. You can't put a Band-Aid on on a gash. It doesn't work. We have to fix the situations.
Well, thank you. We stand with you. I yield back.
Let me ask you all, step away from the panel. Thank you for being deeply pained again. I know you do it every day, but now we've asked you to do it again publicly. I do want to take just a moment to say that the federal government has the upper hand obligation to do more than a city, a county, a state, because it is the United States of America. That's right. I am grateful, Congressman, that we both heard this. The frivolity of this fund is shameful. And minimally, the federal government can inquire about what has been provided for the families. You are not a mystery. We don't have to research who you are. You're no longer missing, or you're not missing. You haven't left the area. And for me, that is ultimately disturbing as listening to the 77 minutes. And I just want to submit into the record and I'll use it continuously. The shooter sends text messages before shooting grandmother at 11:06. Final text message the shooter sent to the German friend. We have to wonder, if we are so technologically sophisticated, why this did not draw any attention. And I'm going to use the old adage, if you see something, say something. If someone saw something, they should have said something. My recollection is that the shooter crashed. That's not something silent. That means a crash could have caused, and that was around a little bit before 11:28. That seems like a long time, but a crash, you could have been surrounded by any manner of persons who's responsible to legally make the school safe. That's a noise, that's something. Go running. What is it? Somebody's crashing right by the school. But I think the thing that I want to, and it says that the gunman entered about somewhere around 11:32 and 11:33. The one thing I want to just add into the record, and I will then yield back to you all. The shooter turns 18, the legal age for purchasing a rifle in Texas, May 16 to May 18, 2022. On May 16th, that same day, he purchases a Daniel Defense AR-15 style rifle and 1,740 rounds of ammunition. The next day, he purchases a Smith Wesson AR-15 and returns the following day to purchase an additional 375 rounds of ammunition. In total, spent 4,896. Banning the assault weapon, raising the age, could have saved. And I will not finish because I do not want to give you the added pain. The question is, this has to be done. It has to be done now. I thank you for what will be documented back to Washington.
Thank you all.
Cause action in some form that hopefully you will view this as knowing that we care, that the federal government accepts the duty of care. And thank you very much for your testimony. Please, we welcome you to stay and listen to other witnesses who have a lot to contribute to what you are saying today. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
The Congressional Children's Caucus will now call Senator Roland Gutierrez, Senate District 19. Zep Capo, President of the American Federation of Teachers, Texas Chapter. Morgan Craven, J.D., National Director of Policy for the Intercultural Development Research Association. And Lorena Auguste, Robb Elementary School teacher. Let me thank each and every one of you for being here today. We'll say the same thing that I said at the beginning of the first panel. We came because we care. We came to Uvalde because this is where the pain and the story is And we also came to hear from you as experts in your own field for what should be done. The document that I asked the unanimous consent to put into the record is dated the Uvalde Chronology Robb Elementary School, May 24, 2022. We wonder whether or not your testimony had been heeded or you had been listened to, where we'd be today. Our first witness is Senator Ronald Gutierrez, and I'll describe him as a human being who has never ceased feeling the pain of his constituents. He has served as a state representative in the Texas House and chairman of the Defense and Veterans Affairs Committee during the 85th legislative session. And in the 85th legislative session, he established a National Warrior Resilience Center in San Antonio focused on PTSD treatment across the state. He understands the pain that these families are going through. He also successfully passed measures protecting our Texas military bases from closure, 2017, and Senator Gutierrez has fought for state funding for San Antonio state hospitals. In the last month since May 24, he has been unceasing in trying to push for transparency and relief for these families. He is to be listened to, and he has been listened to by those of us in the United States Congress. Senator Gutierrez, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much.
Pull it close.
This may not be working.
Yeah. Let me,
Hello? I think that's okay. Congresswoman, first off, thank you for having me here today. I certainly appreciate your presence in this community that is not your own. You come here from Houston, Texas, representing the good folks of Houston, and as well as Congressman Castro, who I've known for many, many years from San Antonio. I want to thank you both for caring and for being here today. It is about deeds. It's not just words. It's about getting out there and doing something. And by your action today, you're letting us know that what we need to do going forward. I have shed a tremendous amount of tears with these folks, and I've told horrific stories in the past and as to what my experiences were with these families and what they've had to go through. But I think that what you want to do going forward is the most important thing from here, because we have to accept the reality of that horrific tragedy and figure out what went wrong and how we can avoid it from happening again. And I can only start not wanting to be partisan, but simply telling the truth. My first request on day 2 was to get $2 million to the local nonprofit clinic, Community Health Development, Inc., from the governor's office for mental health care. That didn't happen. That particular agency never received any money from the governor's office. What the county did get was $5 million to buy a brand new building for the district attorney, a lawyer, to issue trauma funds to families. So you're an attorney, Congressman Castro's an attorney, I'm an attorney. Imagine that. We went and got our JD degrees, and yet our governor in the state of Texas felt it was important to give $5 million to a lawyer to administer mental health to this community out of his emergency funds. That needs to be fixed from on a going forward basis. What this tragedy has taught me more than anything is that government has to do better at resolving something that has happened far too often in our communities in Uvalde, in Santa Fe, in Sutherland Springs, in El Paso, in Midland, Odessa, and all throughout the country. Imagine this. I learned, Congresswoman, that we have a $45 million grant to raise and lift up a new school when tragedies like this befall us. It's called Project SERV, S-E-R-V. It is a federal grant that exists. The folks in the school district in Uvalde has not availed themselves of that $45 million grant because of the tremendous amount of bureaucracy, bells and whistles to go out and get that money for this community. Additionally, that money would go to the Texas Education Agency. We need to figure a way at a federal level to divert that money straight to the school districts that would need it most in those instances, like Uvalde ISD. We found out during this process, Congresswoman, that radios for all of the law enforcement, except for the federal government, did not work in that building. And so, to the extent that the federal government could do something about that, we would certainly appreciate that. This community, 7 years ago, let the governor of the state of Texas, as well as Steve McCraw, know that the radios were not functioning. We have spent over $10 billion in a failed Operation Lone Star that is nothing more than stunts and political misinformation campaigns and propaganda campaigns, instead of doing the things that they're supposed to do, which is take infrastructure money to communities to allow them to fix the most vital types of infrastructure, communication between law enforcement agencies that could not have worked. And yet this governor has known about this problem for going on 7 years. We now know that with this entire failed Operation Lone Star, that none of these law enforcement agencies, state law enforcement agencies, trained with the local agencies for any type of mass shooting like this. Never, ever happened. You have something that is called the Victims of Crime Compensation Act, as you know, Congresswoman. You ask about failures, you ask about what we can fix. That money is doled out to the states, first to the governor's office, then to the Attorney General's office in 2 different tranches and 2 different funds. I will not mention the man's name out of respect for him, but we have a parent here who has made a continued application to the Attorney General's office for the unemployment component of the VOCA statute, and he has been denied additional dollars. The VOCA statute allows $50,000 of unemployment funds per family if they cannot go back to work. I submit to you, Congresswoman, that these people are not freeloaders. They're the most hardest working people I've met in my life. And they would give everything back to have their children back. But not one of them, Brett Cross, stands 300 feet in the air, hangs 300 feet in the air, fixing windmill turbines. How is he supposed to do that? How are we supposed to ask him to go back and do that with all of the PTSD that he has? Javier Cáceres, who has a glass company, already told you how he'd been denied 3 times by 3 different state agencies on trying to get unemployment compensation funds. I could go on, but here we have our most recent application to the Attorney General's office been denied. You asked earlier about the Robb Memorial Fund. It started out as that. Good people from this county set up a fund at a local bank, which later became a fund that was run by the National Compassion Fund, a very good nonprofit. But the process is fraught with paperwork, fraught with establishing trusts for your children, fraught with the surviving children. And so we at a government level should be able, if we can build a school when these things happen, we should develop a process by which government would come in and take these funds and say, we're going to dole them out with a specific criteria in mind. So that it's sad that we have to look at a going forward process as to how we're going to do this in the eventuality that this happens again. But that is part and parcel of why you're here, to prevent this from happening again. But unfortunately, we all know the truth, and so you have to know what failed here. Mental health, we're the last in the United States on mental health funding in this state, because people in power in the state of Texas choose to have that. And as Brett Cross told you earlier, the only evil here, like our illustrious governor likes to say that this was a terrific set of evil that happened here that day. The only evil is having a problem staring at you straight in the face and doing nothing about it. The last bit that I want to talk about, Congresswoman and Congressman, is a continued infliction of trauma. And my request in having you come here, and thank you for indulging me in this, is that we need more from the Department of Justice from an investigatory standpoint. It is everything to have gone through what happened on the 24th. And most mass shootings, the reports from the police, the studies, everything happens within a couple of weeks. And yet, here we have a Department of Public Safety that has done nothing more than dole out misinformation, have a blame game that blamed, number one, the school superintendent, the school police chief, then a school teacher for putting a rock on a door, which she never did. That woman is not doing well. She's not well today. For 10 days, she had to put up with people blaming her for the loss of these children. The same head of the Department of Public Safety put out a story that the Uvalde PD had a chance to shoot this man, when indeed they knew full well the real story, that the police officer with Uvalde police, the second part of his statement said, it turned out not to be the shooter, but rather the PE coach. And that is a continuation of the trauma that has occurred. And that is only 3 different issues that have happened to date. I can list 10, 15 issues that have happened within the Department of Public Safety. And so I'm asking, like the mayor, who could not be here today, has asked, and the mayor and I are of differing parties, but we both want to do well for these folks, for the Department of Justice to fully investigate the law enforcement response that occurred on May 24th, and why officers that had enough training, that had enough ammunition, that had enough equipment, stood outside in a hallway like it was a Sunday afternoon and did nothing. And with that, Congresswoman, I know that I've taken a lot of the other witnesses' time, so I'll yield to them.
Let me thank you, Senator, for your important testimony and also for your important commitment. I know that we'll say this over and over again, but it resounds louder to members of Congress, Homeland Security and Intelligence and Department and Judiciary. I will not speak for my colleague, but I imagine he might speak for himself in his time of questioning as I yield to the next witness. But I just want to say we demand a full and thorough investigation by the Department of Justice, that the community is aware that it is going on, and that the parents are also part of those who will be questioned thoroughly at their will for any information that they may have that will contribute to the transparency and accountability. That is the role of the federal government.
Yes, ma'am.
And I believe we have a Department of Justice, as evidenced by the lead of Attorney General Garland, that they are not fearful. And so we want to direct their fearlessness for the comfort of these parents. Let me welcome our next witness, President of the American Federation of Teachers, Texas Chapter. I know Mr. Capo for years of his commitment to education and teaching, and past president of the Houston Federation of Teachers. He believes that quality education, public education, and old-fashioned hard work are requirements of a robust economy, and that public schools are the key to a robust civil society. Mr. Capo, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to be here. Representative Castro, thank you for attending as well. I can't begin to imagine the feelings of the families that we heard from in this first panel, but I have a pretty darn good feeling how Mr. Reyes felt, because almost every teacher I speak to across this state makes the same remarks and has the same concerns. They don't feel safe. And most of them feel, when they see these stories, there but by the grace of God go I, because they don't know when they're going to be next. As a social studies teacher, I understand that the freedoms under our Constitution often come with sacrifices. But our children deserve the freedom to go to school without the fear of gun violence. They deserve the freedom to learn and be children. And unfortunately, in our state, week after week, we're in heightened drills, new trainings. Senator Gutierrez talked about the re-traumatization of not just of the Uvalde family, of classrooms across the state right now. I would be remiss if I didn't say the most important thing that could happen is that we reinstate the assault weapons ban in this country. I thank the House of Representatives for passing H.R. 1808 to the Senate. All eyes are on the Senate right now, as it's their turn to do the job that needs to be done. Because the fact of the matter is, the science teacher in me also understands observation and data. And we have sets of data that trauma surgeons and epidemiologists have studied from before the 1994 ban, during the ban, and after. And the fact of the matter is, had this tragedy happened during the period the ban was in place, there would have been a 70% less chance that we would have lost life. In addition to better safety, gun safety laws, I understand that there's mental health issues that need to be addressed. But I hear from our teachers, from our nurses, from our psychologists, from our school counselors. And what they say almost to a T is they don't have the time or the resources to help the kids that are hurting, to keep them from hurting other kids. We have got to figure this piece out, because the preventative work that is necessary is not happening and hasn't happened. Our hometown paper, the Houston Chronicle, shared with the whole community, with the world, no doubt, what we as educators have known, that is that since they did the research from 2013 and beyond, not one single school district has actually been able to match the ratio, the recommended ratio of health professionals, counselors, nurses, or social workers to students in any of our districts. And I understand that the Senate may hide behind the Second Amendment to keep from passing the assault ban, but they also have the ability to tax and fee. We shouldn't be asking our students to sacrifice. If we're going to, when we have gun makers and when we have ammunition makers making record profits, why are they not paying the fees? Why does it take heartfelt other Americans across the country to donate to families? Why are they not covering the costs of the trauma that these parents are having to go through? Why are we not putting bills in place to do that? As Senator Gutierrez said, there does need to be a better way to administer the funds. Quite frankly, our teachers took up funds, like so many Americans, for the families that are here. We chose not to give them to the fund because a week after the tragedy in Uvalde, we were contacted by the families and teachers in Sandy Hook, Connecticut, and they told us. They said the same things that we heard from the parents in this first panel about what would happen with the funds, what would happen to the families. So we've held those funds back, what little they are, to make sure that they go to the right place. But we could, in addition to passing the assault weapons ban, in addition to making those that produce these guns pay the funding necessary to make sure student and healthcare ratios are met in our schools, we can also redistribute or put up those systems in place to make sure nobody has to go through these pieces again. Those are three major factors that we've heard over and over again from each set of families, and we hope that this time we're able to start putting in the proactive steps to make, even if we can't, with as much as most of us would like to keep this from happening again, to make sure that when it happens again, we're better prepared and we're much more efficiently able to meet the needs of our families and our kids. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and again, thank you very much for your service to this state and to the nation with a very cherished group of people, our teachers. Thank you very much. Delighted now to recognize Morgan Craven, JD, National Director of Policy, Advocacy, and Community Engagement, Intercultural Development Research Association. It is important that this organization supports the integration and coordination of national and state policy reform efforts dealing with school discipline and safety education for emergent bilingual students, preparation and access to higher education, and community-led, culturally sustaining schools. I'm very delighted to have Morgan here because I thought, as I listened to the parents, they want futuristic ideas, not the same old ideas, and they want truly have a safe school for their children that are still going to school, and we hope that you will offer those solutions. Morgan received her bachelor's degree in international relations from Stanford with a further degree, law degree from Harvard Law School. We recognize Ms. Craven for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Congresswoman Jackson Lee, Congressman Castro, and members of the Uvalde community. My name is Morgan Craven. I'm the National Director of Policy, Advocacy, and Community Engagement at IDRA. We're a national education nonprofit, but we're based in San Antonio. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I come to you with my experience today as an attorney who represented students who were disciplined in their schools, as a policy advocate who has focused on school safety and discipline and policing practices for the last 10 years, and as a parent of 2 Black and Latino children whose safety, happiness, and well-being I think about constantly. When horrific tragedies like school shootings happen, I know we're all considering what we can do to better protect our young people and ensure schools are safe. And when we think about those policies and practices that increase school safety, we have to think not only about safety from these horrific targeted acts of violence, but also what safe and supportive schools look like every single day for every single student. There's actually a lot of alignment in the approaches that create consistently strong school climates for all students and those that decrease the likelihood of school violence. Many of the strategies that help young people feel that they are an important part of the community, that help teachers feel prepared to recognize and address students' needs, and that make all families feel connected to their children's education every day, are the very same strategies that can help us to proactively recognize and respond to issues before they become more serious safety concerns. And to be clear, there's no single answer to achieving school safety, including when it comes to targeted violence. Rather, in order to see the supportive schools that we want for children and decrease the likelihood of violence in our schools, we have to invest in a number of strategies, an ecosystem of support that includes gun violence prevention and mental and behavioral health care for everyone. And I know we've talked about this today. Gun violence is the leading cause of death for children and teenagers in this country, and there are escalating and unaddressed health concerns for young people, including trauma and social isolation. So we can't expect to achieve school safety and support students the way we need to without fully confronting those 2 issues. But we can't expect to achieve safe and supportive schools for all students if we adopt some of the approaches that we often hear policymakers and others call for in response to these acts of school violence. We have already heard here in Texas and across the country from certain states calls to increase school-based police, to create overly surveilled schools, and to increase zero tolerance and harsh discipline policies that suspend or corporally punish or expel children or put them into alternative school programs, even for behaviors that could and should be handled by educators and administrators in schools. These punitive approaches are common responses among some to violence in schools, even though there's no evidence that they actually make schools safer. What we know is that many parents, students, and teachers report that punitive schools make them feel less safe. When campuses become environments where young people are policed, environments that center punishment, we know that students may be afraid to talk to adults, afraid to report concerns about a classmate, afraid to seek help, and afraid to talk about what they have heard or seen in their communities that may need an adult's attention. And this can make it less likely that students will report potential violence, and it can create school climates that are not conducive to the learning and relationship building that are key to every student's success. We know that these overly punitive strategies push young people out of our school communities and isolate them when they most need to be pulled in. And we know that that has a disproportionate impact on our Black students, our Latino youth, our students of color, our students with disabilities, and LGBTQ youth. So while these harsh approaches not only endanger the well-being of young people, they create this dangerous facade of security to the detriment of real safety. And importantly, if we put our energy and resources into what doesn't work, we fail to invest in what does, which is what I want to talk about now. So instead of creating these highly punitive and police schools, as some policymakers continue to propose, we have to invest in supports for individual students and teachers, including diverse and well-trained school-based mental and behavioral health professionals who can respond to students' and teachers' needs. We have to support the implementation of programs like restorative practices and social emotional supports that improve school climates, provide meaningful consequences for challenging behaviors, and help young people relate to each other and to their environments in a healthy way. We have to give schools tools and hold them accountable for appropriate and consistent responses to bullying and harassment so that harmful behaviors stop and no student feels they are without protection when they walk onto their campus. We have to adopt meaningful consequences to students and adults' challenging behaviors and promote strategies that allow for that really important relationship building in a school community. School safety experts, even those who approach this issue from very different vantage points and ideologies, consistently note that this relationship building is key to strong schools and to identifying and responding to challenging behaviors. And the federal and state governments can invest funds, they can issue guidance, and they can provide technical support so that schools and districts are able to do this. And I have to say, I know that many of these approaches have already have the support of this community. I think what's been clear to all of us is that the Uvalde parents and teachers and students are invested in their schools and have worked really hard to develop a community of care here. And so local, state, federal governments must continue to invest in those programs and approaches. They have to help them develop, and all of us have to receive that support from our policymakers as part of this larger safety investment. I'll just end by saying that I want to share some student perspectives on this question of school safety. IDRA has a youth advisory board comprised of 10 incredible high school students from across Texas who help us to understand the impact of our policy positions. And I spoke with these students about school safety, and they were very, very clear. More guns in their communities, more police in their schools, and more discipline that targets and excludes young people will not make them feel safe. They specifically said that those approaches make them feel more anxiety and more panic, even when they are told that they are in place for their security. What they do want is what state and federal policymakers must work to provide. Students are asking for their schools to be responsive when they report that they've been bullied or harassed. They are asking for investments in counselors and social workers who have the time to support their needs. They're asking for classrooms where they feel they can be themselves and see themselves as they learn. And they are asking for diverse educators who are not armed with weapons, but are empowered to teach with empathy and care. And they are right. That is what we must try to achieve for every single student, every single day, as we implement the additional meaningful reforms targeted at stopping these horrific acts of violence. Thank you.
Let me thank you for your testimony. and acknowledge that it is a roadmap that should be part of healing. Let me now acknowledge Lorena Auguste and to thank her for extending herself to be able to give your own personal view of your experience, and to recognize that you are not only a teacher that substitutes, but you are a designer, and that you have spent days of joy giving children a sense of happiness. We all love Peter Pan, we all love The Wizard of Oz, and we all love the Beauty and the Beast. And we thank you for that. And I thought, and it was thought by the caucus, that you would be well to speak your own personal experience. And I know that in your testimony today, you're not representing the Uvalde School District, but you have an experience that we want to hear. And we are very pleased to have you here. And so we recognize you for 5 minutes. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Congresswoman Jackson, and thank you, Congressman Castro. I devoted 4 years of my life teaching for UCISD. I started off part-time. I worked with Rob, Dalton, Anthony, Morales, Flores, the high school. I fell in love with the high school. That would lead within my first year to being hired every summer as a summer fine arts instructor and costume designer for those productions you just mentioned. Many of those students were Rob students. At least 8 or 9 of the children that died were our summer academy babies. I enjoyed also teaching after school for the ACE program, fashion design for underprivileged teenagers. I enjoyed this very much, and I was able to accomplish all this with an associate's degree in fashion design from the International Academy of Design and Technology, also known as Sanford Brown Colleges in San Antonio, Texas. My testimony is very similar and echoes with the parents and with these other professionals here, in the sense that gaining the trust of the students is a huge challenge. There are things that I will briefly mention to you. When I was in lockdown for almost 6 hours with my class, that I had never known throughout the school year. But they entrusted me. My students entrusted me with that knowledge of a chat room. The shooter had followers. 2 parents, literally approximately 11:34 a.m. 2 parents called 2 of my freshman students in my front row and basically were screaming and crying on the phone, asking if they were okay, where were they, where was their teacher, that they were at Rob going to check on their siblings, and that they were going to come to the high school immediately to come pick them up, in which I instructed the 2 students to continue their conversations via text message. I gave the rest of my class permission to continue texting. We turned out the lights. I barricaded the door with a metal trash can. We were in art room, room 200, in the first wing of the high school, and we proceeded to wait. Within 3 hours, we heard helicopters. Almost 4 hours in, to more surprise, which I'm sure none of you heard this in the media, because only the people who worked at the high school that day knew. We would hear yelling echoing through the hallway of a female voice, basically stating to get the F down or I will shoot. We heard this. We heard it echoing through. We proceeded to hear feet scurry. We heard what sounded like military voices, stay down, get back to your classrooms. We also heard the marching of the SWAT team coming through the schools. I saw them peer through the window, motioning for us to stay down while we were in the dark. When we heard the marching continue all throughout the school, we also heard a loud noise like something had fallen to the floor. That was that. Within an hour and a half, we were escorted, instructed, broken up into groups. I was sent to the cafeteria at the end of the day to supervise with other teachers and students. There were snipers on the roof. There were officers everywhere, everywhere. But it took literally 4 hours. The contribution and the suggestion that I would like to make, based on not only my experience in working for 4 years and currently working now in San Antonio, as of the aftermath that so many of us in Uvalde have witnessed, it has come to my recognition that we are lacking when it comes to emergency protocols. To be more specific, an active shooter training is not the same as a lockdown drill and concerning public schools. All teachers, including substitute teachers, staff, and janitors, should be trained in a summer orientation that physically and mentally equips us to save lives. There was far too many times that day that we felt like sitting ducks. When mass shootings occur, there is a lot of unpredictability. We should be given the choice or prepared to deal with that as the situations are occurring. This is not the job of only a town government or school board. It should be a federal priority that all schools in all 50 states shall implement active shooter and lockdown drills for all school staff. The people that I saw that were brave checking the hallways were our janitors, our secretaries, while we were alone. Because the cops that we were assigned that show up every morning on the high school campus fled to go to rob to what we thought they were going there to do their job. And quickly, 24, 48 hours later, I'm reading in the news that they didn't do anything. So it still pains me to this day, even though I'm with new students in San Antonio and I'm enjoying my position, I still mourn my academy students every day. I mourn with the parents. I'm friends with a lot of the parents, their grandparents, their aunts and uncles. Working the summer academy to do Beauty and the Beast this summer was one of the hardest jobs I've ever had to do for the school district, but I did it because the parents and the student survivors voted to the school board and voted and took a survey stating they still wanted to do it and they wanted to change the Beauty and the Beast production to a commemorative to the friends that they lost. My niece is a survivor from Rob. She is alive today because of her teacher, who was 6 months pregnant when she escorted them out the exit of the cafeteria because they heard ongoing gunshots, and a lady across the street opened up her house to take in the whole entire class. My niece is not alive because of a police officer. My niece is alive because of her teacher. And I still now, since then, wake up every day. When I report to my school in San Antonio, I know I'm putting my life at risk. And there's no amount of money that's going to make that okay. I know that. I was never like that before. But I would, in a heartbeat, not hesitate to still go to school, to still have the opportunity to teach, inspire, and strengthen the future of our nation. They deserve better, and they deserve more, so much more. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for passionate testimony, and I think it showed that the impact was far-reaching. You were in a high school
That day.
that day, and there were actions there that seemed to be impractical and out of the ordinary. And it means it was plaguing the entire school district,
Everybody was affected.
everyone.
Everyone.
Let me proceed with my questions, and then we will have our closing to these witnesses. And each of you, Senator Gutierrez, President Capo, and in his absence, we thank Reverend Dr. Marsh for his earlier testimony, and Morgan Craven and Lorena Auguste had your own special experience on contributing to what these parents are feeling and what these parents are asking for. As I ask you the question, Senator Gutierrez, I just want to, this has stunned me because I heard you, when I first came down, ask for something very simple. And the simplicity of what you were asking for was a special session held many times. I think I have had a special session on redistricting just about almost every moment I can think of there are a series of other special sessions for what many taxpayers would believe are frivolous. You as a senator might want to recount some that did not have to do with life or death issues. So I'm going to ask the first question because I'm confused. That is a very sensible request. My understanding is that it can simply be responded to by the chief executive of the state, and that, to your knowledge, members of the House, both the House and the Senate, were not protesting against a special session, or the taxpayers of Texas did not specifically rise up and say no special session. And so I don't understand why your simple request was not made known and acted upon. As I do so, I want to put into the record where we are in the state of Texas. And many people think that we passed a great law, the Safer Communities Act. But aspects of the law require opting in by our states. So let me, as you answer your question, Senator, again read for the record. Texas has not enacted laws to stop the epidemic. Presently, Texas has no ban on assault weapons, no age 21 minimum to buy a rifle or AR-15 style gun, no universal background checks, no background checks by private or unlicensed dealers, no limits on open carry of firearms, recently passed law, no ban on concealed guns at universities, no red flag laws, no safe storage laws, no waiting period to buy firearms and ammunition, which would have helped in the instance of these beloved parents. And I gave the timeline. It was only a matter of 3 days possibly between the purchase of the offender, the perpetrator, and his dastardly act. No closing of the gun show loophole. Go anywhere to a gun show, show nothing, buy a gun. No registration or licensing for guns or gun owners. And of course, many people argue the Second Amendment, but it's interesting, we license to drive. We have to have an insurance license, teaching license. We have to get a license to get our hair done, men and women.
Yes, ma'am.
So, help me understand, I'm baffled why we sit here today and there's no special session.
Congresswoman, I have asked Greg Abbott time and time again for a special session to raise the age limit, something a very modest change in legislation, to change the age limit on access to militarized weaponry from 18 to 21. In the state of Texas, you have to be 21 years old to purchase a handgun. And yet you can find and purchase a higher-powered piece of ammunition, weaponry, military-style weaponry at the age of 18, like this young man did. Ironically enough, he couldn't get it prior to it. He asked people to get him this gun. He asked his uncle. His uncle said, no, not going to do that. He waited till his 18th birthday, and on the third day, he purchased his first AR-15 at the store, like he was going to 7-Eleven. The day after that, he bought hundreds of rounds of ammunition, and the day after that, he picked up the AR-15 that he had purchased online on his 18th birthday. 65% of Republican constituents in the state of Texas are asking for an age limit increase to the age of 21 for militarized weaponry. 74% of Republican moms in the state of Texas want an age increase. I cannot sit here and have this happen and have a colleague of mine go through what I've had to go through. Go to 8 little girls' funerals. See them in their coffins open and one coffin not open because of the damage that was done to this little girl. What these families have had to go through. Congresswoman, on the first night I arrived, on the 24th that evening, I stood out in a parking lot of a civic center that was called a reunification center that night. Parents were asked to submit DNA samples to match them with their children, because in many instances, their corpses were unidentifiable. I heard screams like I had never heard before in my life. And here we sit in a state with a governor that refuses to do the modest thing. You heard a parent say, have an assault weapons ban, a federal assault weapons ban. I agree with that at the federal level for sure. But these same parents that sat before you today have said, okay, Governor, we understand you don't want to do that. Do the minimum. Do the smallest thing that you can do so that a kid, an 18-year-old kid, doesn't have access to these types of weapons. And this governor has time and time again refused to do the minimum, to do the right thing here. The common denominator in anybody's testimony today, Madam Chair, is guns. And it's guns in the access of people that shouldn't have them. There's no good guy defense. 369 good guys stood in a hallway and did nothing. These families have asked for the minimum, and this governor has refused. You brought up the Safer Communities Act, and you brought up opting into extreme risk protective orders. This governor will not avail himself of the incentives. In actuality, when that bill went over to the U.S. Senate, they changed those incentives. And we'll be able to get incentives, Congresswoman, because we have veterans courts and because we have drug courts in Texas. That happened in the U.S. Senate, and it should not have happened, but I understand it. I understand that legislation has to meld and gel so that we can get some good things done, because we did do a lot of good things with the bill, like the boyfriend loophole. And that's a good thing. And I understand we shouldn't let the perfect get in the way, and we shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I get all that. But this governor will not avail himself or make extreme risk protective orders an option for the state of Texas. And he has said that time and time again.
That was my very point. I think it was well-intentioned to have it an opt-in. The earlier bill in the House made it mandatory or made it a federal law. But let me just finish, if I might, to help these parents. What kind of a large footprint do you want the U.S. Department of Justice to have?
Madam Chair, I believe that what has happened here, and I don't want it to be said that I am so extreme as to argue that this is a cover-up, but hell, I've said it already once before. We have law enforcement. We live in a world where it's 2022. We have all the technology, we have everything on tape, we have everything on video, and the Department of Justice can see everything that's there. And I've seen just about everything that's there by now. I was ordered to sign a non-disclosure agreement. I was asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement, which I did. And it's my hope that you can someday, with your colleagues, call a hearing in Washington so that we can get down to the truth of what went on that day and the failures of law enforcement. Because the message to all of us in the United States of America is that we will never get to learn if we leave it up to a district attorney who says, hey, there's a criminal investigation pending, we can't talk about it. If we leave it to a governor that says, I'm going to listen to the district attorney. If we leave it to a director of the Department of Public Safety that says, well, I'm sorry, but there's an investigation that I can't get into. That none of us as policymakers will ever understand what went wrong and why police froze in place. And the very dialogue and the idea that we let the local school district police chief be the guy in charge and he is the guy that's solely in charge is preposterous, because I can submit to this, Congresswoman, That did not happen here. That did not happen here. It was at failure at every level, and according to the Texas House Rob report, investigative report, agencies at higher levels should have stepped in because they had better ammunition, higher firepower, people with more training to do the job the right way. That never happened. And if you're a policymaker in Austin or in Washington, D.C., you want to know why cops failed. And the sad part, and the reality is, we might have saved 2, 3, 4 lives, 5 lives in that golden hour. Eva Mireles might have lived. There is a young little girl. Her name is Maya Zamora. She is a miracle baby. She was shot 6 times in the upper torso. She spent over 90 days in a hospital, still going to rehab now to this day. Had she gotten to that hospital 4 or 5 minutes later, all the way to San Antonio, she might not be with us today. God knows how many children we could have saved had we gone in earlier. And so, you ask me the breadth of that investigation, they should know. We should know why each and every officer took the actions that they took or didn't take on that faithful day, and why. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Let me quickly move to you, Mr. President. Again, you deal in Austin frequently, advocate for teachers. Were you one of those that would have advocated for a special session or tried to contribute to that thinking, that there was a necessity to have one? If for anything else, you might have needed to urgently put more funding for teachers, or put more funding for some immediate shoring up of schools in the context of Ms. Craven's concept as we went into the fall session. What are your thoughts about this? Again, you gave me an initial testimony, but just far-reaching impact on recruiting teachers and securing teachers. I think, let me finish by saying, I'm appalled to hear that Mr. Reyes said he was not eligible because he made too much money. I've never heard of a victim's fund defined in that way. Would you respond?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we joined the chorus in expecting there should have been a special session. We've had special sessions for things as frivolous as trying to actually take away teachers' voice at work. The governor's called a special session to take payroll deduction rights away from us, yet he couldn't call a special session to ensure the safety and security of children in our entire community. It is extremely unfortunate, and it's frankly a derelict of duty. If we continue along the same road, what we feel that we're going to continue to see is those with the least amount of power to make these decisions continuing to shoulder most of the responsibility. And that frequently is the individuals like Mr. Reyes and Ms. August, the people that are on the front lines with the parents, with the kids. They're often, you heard today, the parents are they're not being listened to either. Until we're able to make some of the necessary changes in how the power structure is put in place, I fear that we're going to continue to get worse and that more people are actually going to leave. I applaud those that are continuing to stay in the profession, but it's had a tremendous impact. Mr. Reyes spoke about the issues that we were in a crisis prior to this happening. Each time we've had to do those drills and those additional things on campuses brings this back to everybody as well too. You have teachers that are at the retirement level saying, you know what, this year is doesn't look like it's going to be better than last year. I'm in a place that I can go home and we're losing more professionals in that way. We've got to make sure that people feel safe and secure. Our teaching conditions are our students' learning conditions. And until we have, frankly, a state government that puts its priorities in that place, I think that it's going to continue to have a detrimental effect, not only on our profession, but on every single classroom right now that doesn't have a fully certified teacher in it.
Thank you so very much. I'm going to yield to my colleague, gentleman from San Antonio, Mr. Castro, for his questioning.
Thank all of you for your testimony. And thank you, Senator Gutierrez, for, I know this is your district that you represent, but for how active you had been in standing up for the community of Uvalde, and as far as I can tell, trying every avenue possible, both to hold folks accountable and also to find out as much information for the community and for the survivors and the parents as possible. And I wanted to ask you, throughout all of this, you're part of state government, you're in the state senate, you and I serve together as state legislature, and yet even as somebody who is a state senator representing one of, if not the largest state senate district in the state, right, perhaps the largest, the doors have been closed many times, even to you, to get basic information, to be able to try to change policy. Can you describe what that experience has been like in trying to hold the state government accountable, and the governor, lieutenant governor, and others?
Thank you, Congressman. I have had to sue the state of Texas to get the information that I needed from the Department of Public Safety. They hid behind the Freedom of Information Act and some of its protections that they would have towards media. They have said that I can get the information if I signed a non-disclosure agreement. I eventually did that. It wasn't, for me, it was more the needing the information, of course, was first and foremost, but it was the principle that the information that they are protecting currently should be available to these families. There's not an amount of money that's ever going to bring back their children. And they'd give it all up if they could have their kids here today. But as you know, it's the only way our legal system makes them whole. And so they should be able to avail themselves of each and every bit of information that shows how each and every one of those law enforcement agencies failed, why they waited for so long, and what they said to one another during that time. This journey is a journey that I didn't want to be on, Congressman. As they often say, they joined a club that they never wanted to be in. They certainly have deserved better. We cannot turn back the hands of time, but these families, both the ones that lost children and those that have injured, government has failed them at every level. And even though I've tried through my staff to help as much as I can, the bureaucracy at the state level, for instance, in that situation with the VOCA funds and unemployment dollars, has certainly failed one gentleman and failed others that want to apply for those unemployment benefits that they are entitled to under this fund. And so we're going to keep trying, Congressman, with the help of yourself and the help of Congresswoman Jackson Lee and others that seek to find the truth, because these families deserve it.
Well, thank you for your work, and as I said earlier, I believe that the way the families and the community has been treated in the aftermath of the massacre at Robb Elementary has been another kind of assault on them. And the intransigence, the secrecy, the lack of transparency are stunning. And I thank you for all of your work in trying to get to the bottom of all of it. I want to ask the three of you and whoever would like to address it. You know, I spoke earlier in the example of my alma mater, Jefferson High School in San Antonio, where last week parents descended on the school because there was a false report of a shooting, and they reacted in what I would describe as a post-Uvalde reaction, which is, it was chaos, because now nobody, I think, throughout the country, and certainly in Texas, is confident in the idea that law enforcement is going to go in and do their jobs and protect their kids. And I also think about the experience in my own family. I have a 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4.5-month-old, and my 8-year-old daughter and 6-year-old son are in school in San Antonio, and we just got an email a few days ago about their drills, and I think what are being called something like run, hide, and fight drills, and what they're expected to do as little kids. And my daughter, shortly after May 24th, as you can imagine, I'm watching the news a lot, she asked whether her school was going to be like Robb Elementary. And so when I say that the country has been scarred, it concerns me in the years ahead that this generation of children in school now are growing up with that psyche. And you're in school in San Antonio now, you were in Uvalde before, and what are y'all seeing from teachers and students in school today after this?
I was informed that with my second employer that teachers are now getting active shooter training, and they're actually going through role playing, but substitute teachers are not, because the substitute teachers that are employed with the public schools and charter schools alike are hired through a third-party company, usually an online company, and they train us online, but it's very generalized. It's not specific, and I just feel that if the teachers are receiving active shooter training along with lockdown drills, they'll be better equipped to deal with disarming somebody, but still your substitutes are left floating like, well, we were not invited to the active shooter training. What do we do? You know, there's more to be done. And I voiced it to my administrative professionals and suggested, you know, like, as soon as you set something up, I will gladly show up, and I would love to learn how to disarm someone, or what else can I do? You know, what other forms of evacuation? A lot of the schools I work in now have 2 floors, 3 floors. You know, what if the situation is you have to break the window, and how do we climb out the window? You know, I've spoken to other teachers, other new teachers I work with, and there are teachers literally buying ropes, buying emergency kits, like, to set up an emergency plan if they have to. Another thing is, I got into substitute teaching because of my mom. My mom is a Marine. She served 12 years. My father did 20 as a Marine, and she started substituting 6-7 years ago, and she's the one who encouraged me to try it. And she just told me, she called me when I was at work last Friday in San Antonio, Mija, I think I'm going to go back into substitute teaching. They need veterans. She goes, I have experience. I can still fight. I can still, you know, but she said not just veterans alike. Even if you have military personnel that only have 4 years experience, 6 years experience, you know, there should be some kind of, maybe, I don't know, some kind of incentive. Maybe the government can offer an incentive to get more military personnel involved. Not to turn it into a boot camp, but at least they know what to do. I mean, or at least train us civilians so that if we're waiting, the way we were at high school, we know we're not just waiting for anything and praying for just anything. We're equipped. If you're aware of a situation and you walk into that situation knowing what you're getting into, but you're trained in it, you're going to be far more successful, whether you're saving your life or, you know, other civilians' lives, versus it's just kind of falling in and happening randomly, and you don't know anything that's going on. So that's where I'm, like, seriously thinking about. But I don't know where to go, and I don't know where to start with that. And that's why we need you, you know, and the rest of Congress to implement a plan. I mean, maybe there need to be more surveys done also within the school systems. Maybe this needs to be implemented where the school board representatives from all cities come together under the states and, you know, combine. We shouldn't be working against each other. This is something we can do together, and it'll benefit all of us in the United States as well.
Thank you.
So I think that the incident that you're referring to was the one that where this happened across the country to many schools. It happened in my neighborhood school. I know exactly what that feeling was like. Heights High School in Houston, where many of my neighbors go, where many of my friends' kids go, had the same incident happen, a false threat. My heart dropped to my knees at that moment in time. I know exactly what that parent was talking about when they said they felt like a failure, because immediately in that one instance of having it hit so close to home, you go through this immediate reflective period of feeling like a failure. It's happening on your watch again. What are we going to do about this? Who is involved now? How do we find out which families and kids are safe and which are not? Looking at the media and seeing people that you know standing out there trying to make sure that they get a hold of their kids puts this in such a real state that many of our teachers and school employees alike are unsure what to do. Their reactions are across the field. From Miss August's reaction, I think, of wanting to become empowered enough to know what to do so that she's prepared to help her students if this happens, to the entire other side of the spectrum where people are so, it's not about just being fearful, but it's so angry and frustrated that they're already expected to do so much more. How am I'm going to put this on my plate again as well too, as the teacher and as everything else that we're expected to do, and why should I have to? When do I actually get to focus on teaching? Who is going to take responsibility for the rest of this work that needs to happen in our communities? Because our schools are not separate, distinct entities. They are part of neighborhoods. They are part of systems. And until we integrate those systems in a way where everybody is appropriately sharing that responsibility and not just trying to frankly cover one's ass by hiding information from an elected official that is supposed to be working to try to get the answers for their community, people are going to continue to feel unmoored. And that's probably the best way that I can describe it, is not knowing if what or anything that you do is going to make a difference.
Thank you.
Sadly, we have a lot in common here. So my husband and I sat down the other day and figured out what to do if our 6- and 9-year-old, something happens at their school, and how we go get them. And we did that because we heard so many interviews from the Uvalde parents of having to do that in the moment. I have a very good friend whose daughter was at Jefferson High School, and the students were in the classroom figuring out how to lower each other down if they needed to do that. And so I share those stories to say, like, we are obviously all experiencing a collective trauma here, and that's why it's so important to focus on things on the front end. We shouldn't be constantly responding to something. We have to think about what prevention looks like. And so when we think about what preparation and prevention look like, they look like the gun reforms that we're talking about. They look like the mental and behavioral health supports that we're talking about. They look like the things that I spoke about earlier, building relationships in our school community so we understand what's going on with every single child and every single family. It looks like community partnerships with schools, as Mr. Capo just mentioned, so that we are not relying on the schools solely to be the places that are providing services, but we're equipping them to recognize when somebody needs something and refer them to the appropriate community-based organization to provide that. It's allowing kids to feel like they are welcome in their classrooms, that their cultures and their identities are honored, that they're not being persecuted for who they are, that they're not being silenced for who they are. And we do that front end work to really bring people in and build that community. I think there's, it's not just me thinking, it is, research shows that this is a way to build those strong schools and reduce the likelihood of these horrific events happening.
Thank you. I yield back, Sheila.
This has been enormously powerful, not because of my colleague and myself, but because of each and every one of you, for the parents who stayed here. It burdens us as we leave, because you've charged us with our assignment. You've charged us not to forget. And so I want to yield to my colleague for his closing before I submit my closing. But I can say, as I recount the witnesses that are here and acknowledge them in my closing, that we should have had the entire House of Representatives here. But the good news is that we came to Uvalde, and we're going to take you back to Washington. So let me yield to you for your closing, and then I will follow.
I just want to say thank you for your testimony, and to the parents and the survivors for their testimony. And we will do everything that we can to be helpful to this community and to get justice and accountability and transparency for everyone.
Thank you, Congressman. Let me thank the parents, the teacher, Mr. Reyes, Mr. Cazares, thank you. It does not fill the hole in the pain, but thank you. Mr. Cross, we thank you. Mr. Garza, Angel Garza, we thank you. Kimberly Rubio, again, we thank you. And to Christopher Salinas, who is here, we thank him as well for those who are willing to provide us with this enormous insight. To Senator Gutierrez, we thank you for unceasingly continuing to protect and represent your constituents. To Mr. Capo, we want to stand with you for building a new generation of teachers who know that the nation cares about them. We thank Reverend Dr. Michael K. Marsh, the St. Philip's Episcopal Church, and Morgan Craven, thank you. And we hope that you will be engaged on the legislative process. And Mr. Gust, for your history and for the insight that you gave, and for thanking you to come back and giving comfort on a remembrance play that went on. I want to begin my closing by acknowledging that we had the Santa Fe shooting here in Texas. They were right outside my district. They were students. Is there any reason that we had to have Uvalde again? Besides the issue in that was a weapon unstored. And out of that, I introduced the Kimberly Vaughn Storage Act. I thought it was very simple, just to tell families, store your guns. Store your guns. Manufacturers, write on your gun box, these guns should be stored. Or gun retailer, sell the trigger lock right alongside the gun. And here we are today. The storage bills have not been passed. And I make that point because what I hope that would come out of us leaving Washington, leaving our districts, coming to Uvalde, is that we should never forget, and we should always remember. And so I want to leave the record with the knowledge that there have been 508 mass shootings this year, since January. And this only goes up to September 18th, and we have just gone further. Let me acknowledge Mr. Capo's neighborhood, because I was in Washington in fear for Heights High School. And the enormous video of the panic, the sheer panic, and the parents rushing to the high school and being blocked. And a number of different comments about what and who, the fear that came about. Each day, 12 children die from gun violence in America. Another 32 are shot and injured. And guns are the leading cause of death among American children and teens. 1 out of 10 gun deaths are aged 19 or younger. We still don't have a ban on assault weapons. I'd like to put into the record, and I will say by unanimous consent, I'm just putting the title in, Madam Reporter. I'm not putting the article itself. Classroom versus Fortress, states push slew of new safety school measures. That is Politico, dated August 27th. Texas Tribune, Texas Teachers Union survey finds that school employees don't want to be armed. Texas Tribune, 5 Department of Public Safety officers face a formal investigation over Uvalde shooting response, September 6, 2022. I'm a student in Texas. My teachers and I shouldn't be responsible for stopping mass shooting. Texas gun laws allows 18-year-olds to buy AR-15s, the weapons used in Uvalde shooting. That is CBS. CNN, Uvalde children returned to school after 21 students and teachers were slaughtered, but some kids refused to go back to the classrooms. This is what we're facing. And so I want to leave you with my own set of views about where we are. We demand that this carnage stop. We demand that our children in schools are always safe. We demand that 18-year-olds no longer have an easier time buying an assault weapon than a beer. We demand that no other parent, not one of you, ever again, not one of your neighbors, your sisters or brothers who have children, and boy, I would like to have said, not you. No other parent is asked to provide a DNA sample to help identify their murdered child who's been rendered unrecognizable by an assault weapon. Never again. We demand that no other spouse dies a broken heart after their high school sweetheart is gunned down. We demand that our law enforcement officers are trained and live to protect our children and families. We demand transparency and truth. We demand that no government official offers thoughts and prayers while withholding actions and answers. We demand that Texas state government enact gun safety and gun violence prevention laws to curtail mass shootings. We demand security and safety everywhere we go in our communities, shopping for groceries, worshiping with our families, going out for dinner, movies, festivals, and music. We demand to be free from gun violence. We demand to owe your loved ones something that says never again. And so I hope that this listening section of the United States House of Representatives Congressional Children's Caucus, where this has to have been its most powerful moment, not because of its existence, but because of you who are willing to provide us with testimony, each and every one. And as my colleague has said, we'll work very hard, but I can be assured that the most that have come are the voices of you parents. And I hope in the next day or two it'll be heard around the nation and around the world. Ukraine is fighting for democracy. I wear this pin all the time because I saw children in Ukraine looking as if their life had ended. That was before I had to come home to Texas and Uvalde. One of my constituents is in a jail in Russia. That is a powerful and tragic existence that no parent would want to see their child, Brittany Griner, still trying to bring her home. But there's hope. We have hope. But I sit here today with their parents who can't even get the hope for their child, their little angel. I hope that is seared in the hearts and minds of those who heard you. And I know that Senator Gutierrez has it seared in his heart. And I hope something we did today alters the thinking of this state. And I know the compassionate people I work with, the House of Representatives, the President of the United States, I know that we are able to say, because we work with them every day, we passed the laws you wanted. We did pass the ban. We're still committed to passing the increased age. but we're willing to do something. I demand that we never forget that all that you have experienced continues to be seared in our minds, in our hearts, and our legislative duty to give you hope. With that, let me bring to a close this hearing, this Congressional Children's Caucus listening session held in Uvalde, Texas, on this day, September 26, 2022. Meeting is adjourned.